Imagine holding, like, a weapon that can create a literal nuclear blast.
Right.
Or construct a functioning spacecraft entirely from scratch.
Yeah. Or even repair dying cellular tissue, which is just insane.
It really is. I mean, by all metrics, it is the ultimate piece of cosmic hardware. But if you experience a single, solitary second of self-doubt, like a stray thought of panic while you were holding it, it immediately turns into a completely useless piece of jewelry.
It's wild because it completely shatters our conventional understanding of how tools are supposed to function, you know?
Yeah.
We build machines to remove human error. We like our technology to be fixed, predictable, obedient to the laws of physics. You press a button and action occurs.
Exactly. But when you step into the world of OACAN technology and actually examine the power ring, that predictability just vanishes.
Totally.
We're looking at a piece of hardware where the only actual limit, the only true bottleneck, is the psychological state of the user's mind. So, welcome to another custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you.
Glad to be here.
Today, our mission is taking a massive stack of comic lore, wikis, fan discussions, and even a real-world astronomical breakdown from the Armagh Observatory and Planetarium to answer one massive question. How exactly does this power ring work?
Yeah, and maybe more importantly, could this iconic piece of sci-fi hardware actually exist in the real world?
Right.
Because we aren't just talking about a magic wishing ring here. That is like the most common misconception. We are dissecting a highly complex technological conduit tied directly to an entire universe's emotional spectrum.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand how the modern ring operates on a mechanical level, we basically have to look at the historical shift in the lore itself.
Yeah, the origin story.
Right. The origin fundamentally transformed from pure mysticism to advanced alien science.
What's fascinating here is how this narrative shift mirrors society's broader evolution during the mid-20th century.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we move from believing in mystical, magical solutions to heavily relying on science fiction, space exploration, and, tangible technology.
Right, the space race era.
Exactly. In the earliest iterations of the lore, back in 1940 with Alan Scott, the power was genuinely magical. It was tied to an artifact containing chaotic, uncontained universal magic called the Star Heart.
Yeah.
But as the lore evolved, specifically the 1959 reboot with Hal Jordan, that concept was completely rewritten. It became a technological marvel created by immortal scientists from Maltus who called themselves the Guardians of the Universe.
I always like to visualize the difference like this. The original concept of the ring was essentially a standalone battery-operated flashlight.
Huh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, it had its own internal isolated power source. But the modern iteration of the ring, that is a highly advanced smart device constantly connected to a universal cloud network.
Specifically, the central power battery on the planet Oa.
Exactly. And the physical rings themselves are made of this weird crystal-like substance that can shatter but doesn't bend, and they have this crazy advanced onboard AI.
And, the creators of that network, the Guardians, they didn't just build these rings on a whim. The lore states they previously attempted to police the universe with a robotic force called the Manhunters.
Oh, right, robots.
Yeah, and those machines were powered by cold, unfeeling binary logic, and they failed catastrophically.
Because they lack nuance.
Exactly. They ultimately destroyed an entire sector of Space Sector 666s because they couldn't process the gray areas of morality. So the Guardians realized that a weapon without a biological emotional limit is fundamentally dangerous.
They needed to weaponize the emotional spectrum itself, specifically the green light of willpower.
Right.
And that concept of weaponizing emotion brings us to a massive sticking point. It's something I see heavily debated in the fan discussions we pulled for this deep dive, specifically on Reddit.
Oh, I bet.
If the central power battery on Oa provides infinite fuel for these rings, why do the users always act like they are physically and mentally exhausting themselves to create a simple force field?
It's a great question.
Like, if the gas tank is always full, why is the driver sweating?
That gets to the absolute core of what the ring actually is. In this universe, the emotional electromagnetic spectrum is a literal, tangible field of energy. It's much like gravity or radiation.
Okay.
So willpower isn't just a state of mind, it is a physical, measurable force. And the ring itself does not generate a single spark of power. It acts purely as a transformer, a conduit.
So it's basically siphoning raw, unshaped energy from that central server.
Yes, but raw energy is entirely useless on its own. The user's internal psychological willpower acts as the skill or the engine required to pull that raw energy through the ring and shape it into physical reality.
Ah, I see.
The battery provides the fuel, but the human brain is the rendering engine.
Which means the constructs, the physical objects they build out of solid light, are entirely dependent on the wielder's cognitive focus.
Okay.
Creating a giant green boxing glove to punch a villain is one thing, but making that glove as dense and structurally sound as titanium? That requires the brain to somehow simulate the molecular density of metal in real time.
And we see that cognitive load manifests very differently depending on the specific psychology of whoever is working the ring. The structural integrity of the hard light reflects the deep-seated mental framework of the user.
Right, because Kyle Rayner creates very different things than John Stewart.
Exactly. Think about the difference between an artist and an architect. Kyle, an artist, might render a beautifully elaborate, highly imaginative construct. It looks incredible,
Oh.
but he is willing it into existence as a solid block of concept.
Whereas John Stewart, with a background in architecture and mechanical engineering, wouldn't just imagine a solid shape.
Right.
When he builds a machine with the ring, he is mentally constructing the internal springs, the firing pins, the tensile strength of every single screw.
Which naturally makes his constructs incredibly dense and structurally sound because he actually understands the physics of what he is rendering. The cognitive load is dispersed across a logical understanding of mechanics rather than just brute forcing an image.
That implies a staggering level of processing power happening inside the user's head, which honestly makes me wonder, I want to push back on the limits of this system for a second.
Go for it.
If a user can create literally anything they can conceptualize, why don't they just constantly create highly specific countermeasures? Like, if you are fighting a rogue Kryptonian, why not just render synthetic kryptonite on the spot and end the fight in 2 seconds?
That is where the ultimate intellectual limit of the ring is exposed. To create kryptonite, you cannot simply imagine a glowing green rock and tell the ring's AI to, make it deadly.
Right, the ring wouldn't know what that means.
Precisely. The wearer must deeply, intimately understand molecular radioactivity. They have to mentally force the generated molecules to emit that exact specific radiation frequency. The ring demands absolute mental precision. If you do not possess a PhD-level understanding of radioactive decay and particle physics, you simply cannot render kryptonite. It is only as smart as its wearer.
So you have to literally assemble the isotope at the atomic level with your mind, all while in the middle of a war zone. That completely changes how you view the hardware.
It really does.
They are running complex quantum physics simulations in their brain just to pull the trigger.
It bridges the gap between hardware and biology perfectly.
But if a human brain is essentially running quantum simulations to render radiation, the sheer computing power required from the ring itself to facilitate that connection is staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
Which makes me wonder, is a device that small, capable of that much processing, even theoretically possible in our world? Does the astronomical scale of this universe hold up to actual science?
Well, the math we pulled from the ARMA Observatory and Planetarium source is incredibly daunting. The lore establishes that the universe is divided into 3,600 sectors, and Earth is in sector 2814.
Okay, 3,600 sectors.
And we know the observable universe contains roughly 80 billion galaxies.
Let's do the math on that. If you divide 80 billion galaxies by 3,600 sectors, wait, that means a single user is responsible for patrolling a jurisdiction containing roughly 22 million galaxies.
Yes. The scale is almost incomprehensible for a single law enforcement officer.
That's insane. And wait, let's follow that logic regarding the hardware. You have a central server on a planet, right, and a user operating a wireless device across a sector of 22 million galaxies.
Right.
The latency alone makes no sense. If I'm fighting a warlord in the Andromeda Galaxy and I think create a shield, wouldn't that command take millions of years to reach the server on Oa and beam the powder back? I'd be dead before the shield even renders.
You would be if the ring relied on traditional electromagnetic waves or even light-speed communication.
Right.
The only way an architecture of that scale functions without latency is through quantum entanglement. The ring and the central power battery aren't merely sending signals back and forth. They're inextricably linked at a subatomic level.
Oh, I see.
A change in the user's cognitive state instantaneously manifests a draw on the battery, completely bypassing linear space.
And speaking of linear space, the lore also claims that the headquarters, the planet Oa, sits at the exact center of the known universe. That always sounded a bit, I don't know, poetic to me.
This raises an important question about the actual astrophysics of our universe. Based on the Big Bang Theory, the universe didn't explode outward from a single static point into an empty room.
Right.
Space itself is expanding. The planetarium source uses a brilliant analogy for this. Imagine the universe as the surface of an inflating balloon. As the balloon expands, all points on the surface move away from each other equally.
Meaning there is no center on the surface of a balloon.
Exactly the point. There is no center of the universe where a physical planet could sit and act as a hub. The center of the expansion would technically be everywhere or nowhere, depending on your mathematical framework.
Got it.
So the placement of Oa is definitely a massive liberty taken with astrophysics.
Okay, so a planet at the center of the universe breaks the laws of physics. But here's where it gets really interesting when you look at the ring itself. Think about Moore's law.
Right, the computing rule.
Exactly. It's the observation that computing hardware exponentially shrinks while simultaneously doubling in processing power. Decades ago, a computer that could barely do basic arithmetic took up an entire climate-controlled room.
Yeah.
Today, the smartphone in your pocket has more processing power than the mainframes that coordinated the Apollo missions.
That is a crucial connection to make, because while we obviously cannot project hard light force fields with our current technology, the baseline concept of the ring isn't entirely rooted in magic anymore.
It's the logical ultimate extreme of Moore's law. I mean, the ring houses a universal translator, an AI database containing the collective knowledge of the cosmos, a quantum communication device, and a localized life support system.
All on your finger.
Exactly. It's just highly advanced miniaturization. Shrinking a planetary supercomputer down to the size of a USB drive, or in this case, a piece of jewelry.
And let's not forget the feats this thing can pull off. It grants flight, going Mach 10 in an atmosphere or near light speed in space. It can create wormholes.
And cellular regeneration, right? Like when Simon Baz
Yep.
cured his brother-in-law's coma.
Yes. It taps into background energy fields and manipulates matter. It is absolute science fiction, certainly, but it is grounded in theoretical concepts of energy manipulation, quantum computing, and material science.
Okay, so we've covered the processing power and the quantum networking. But I'm still stuck on how this device interfaces with the user's biology. Because humans process information through sight, sound, and touch.
Right.
What happens if the user doesn't process information normally, say, an alien species that evolved completely differently? Does the ring just fail?
The onboard AI is remarkably adaptive to biological anomalies. There is a brilliant story in the source material about Kat Matui, a recruiter who had to draft a new member from a species that was entirely blind.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Rotlop fan. His species evolved in a starless sector of space, deep underground. They had absolutely no biological concept of vision.
That seems like a massive user interface problem when your entire operating system is based on the concept of green light. How do you explain the color green to a being without optic nerves?
Well, the ring's AI adapted the translation matrix. Because he couldn't comprehend light waves, the ring translated the green energy into a wave frequency he could biologically process. Sound.
Oh, wait, listen.
Yes, specifically, the ring's output was perceived as an F-sharp bell. He manipulated sound waves instead of light waves. It demonstrates that the energy isn't inherently light, it is a raw wave frequency that the ring translates based on the user's sensory organs.
That is incredibly sophisticated wave translation. But, for all that quantum computing and adaptive AI, the lore is full of bizarre, seemingly primitive weaknesses.
Oh, yes it is.
Most famous one is the yellow impurity. For the longest time, this ultimate weapon couldn't affect anything colored yellow. I've always wondered how a supercomputer gets defeated by a yellow raincoat.
It sounds absurd until you look at the mechanics of wave interference. The lore eventually revealed that a physical entity embodying fear, which is called parallax, and resonates on the yellow frequency of the emotional spectrum, was actually imprisoned inside the central power battery.
Ah, so it was corrupting the fuel source at the server level.
Precisely. If the emotional spectrum operates like an electromagnetic spectrum, yellow and green are adjacent wave frequencies. The presence of the fear entity caused a phase shift in the energy.
Okay, I follow.
So when a user tried to project willpower, the fear frequency created destructive interference. It literally disrupted the green wave at a structural level. A novice user who hasn't learned to perfectly isolate their own fear couldn't maintain the frequency needed to interact with yellow objects.
That makes so much more sense than just yellow is bad. It's a frequency jammer.
Exactly.
But what about the other glaring weakness I read about? The wood weakness. The sources mentioned an ancient lantern who was somehow defeated by literal sticks and stones.
You were referring to Yalan Gur. He was an ancient operative in China who became corrupted and ruled as a tyrant.
Right.
The Guardians realized he was abusing the network, so they remotely pushed an administrative update to his ring, making his specific energy matrix completely vulnerable to wood.
A wooden stick defeats the ultimate weapon. Even with remote updates, that sounds like a massive design flaw.
It does, until you consider the material science of hard light. If the ring creates localized, solidified force fields, the Guardians likely programmed a failsafe where complex organic cellular structures like wood, which is highly porous and fibrous, naturally scatter the energy field.
Oh, so it just disrupts the matrix.
Right. The frequency of his constructs simply couldn't maintain their structural integrity when intersecting with that specific organic structure. It allowed local farmers with wooden clubs to shatter his force field.
A brilliant backdoor programmed by the developers to keep their admins in check. I love that.
Yeah, it's very clever.
But beyond administrative updates and frequency jamming, the absolute biggest weakness seems to be the cognitive bottleneck of the user themselves. Multitasking all these incredible abilities requires constant, active mental bandwidth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the ultimate paradox of this technology. Its greatest strength and its ultimate weakness are exactly the same thing: the living mind.
Yeah, I found a story in the stack where Hal Jordan and Alan Scott were trying to break open a mystical prison holding the Justice League, and it was floating in the vacuum of space. And they couldn't generate enough raw output to shatter the walls.
Because a massive portion of their mental bandwidth was being passively drained just to survive.
Yes. The ring is constantly running a localized life support aura to keep them breathing and insulated against the freezing void of space. To generate the brute force computing power needed to shatter the prison, they had to completely deactivate their own life support.
Wow.
They had to expose themselves to the hard vacuum of space just to reroute all their mental focus and processing power into the attack.
It is the ultimate test of resource allocation. You can possess the most advanced quantum computer on your finger, capable of rendering molecular structures and opening wormholes across 22 million galaxies. But a sudden spike of panic, a momentary lapse in concentration, renders the entire system completely useless.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We started this deep dive talking about hardware, top speeds, and defined limits. We've explored how this piece of cosmic technology isn't just magic.
Right.
It is a highly advanced, mathematically complex conduit for the emotional spectrum. It relies on quantum entanglement, advanced miniaturization, and wave translation. But its true limits aren't determined by battery life or microchips. It is limited entirely by your scientific knowledge, your capacity for imagination, and your sheer unyielding focus.
The device itself is merely a tool, a highly sophisticated one, absolutely. But the real superpower is never the green light. The actual superpower is the wielder's biological ability to conquer their own internal fear, compartmentalize trauma, and architect incredibly complex solutions in their mind while under catastrophic duress.
It is the ultimate marriage of external hardware and internal psychology.
But, there's one final lingering detail buried in the physics of this universe that shifts the entire paradigm. We established that the emotional spectrum is a finite energy field, constantly fed by the collective emotions of quadrillions of lives across the expanding cosmos.
An emotional ecosystem, essentially.
Consider the implications of that ecosystem. If the green energy of willpower is a finite, quantifiable resource, what happens when 7,200 operatives, armed with the most demanding quantum weapons ever created, draw massive amounts of power simultaneously to fight a universal war?
Oh, wow.
Are the sworn peacekeepers of the universe slowly, inadvertently draining the very will to live from the galaxies they are sworn to protect?
That is a terrifying thought. Next time you think about the ultimate weapon, just remember the hardware might seem limitless, but the mind powering it carries a heavy universal cost. We will leave you to ponder that. Until next time on The Deep Dive.